Yes, thank you. So these were the lines, page 58, where we stopped last time. And this was the reference to the powers of the spirit, the immortal powers of the spirit that all of us partake of, and how their purity is maintained, how their impartiality is maintained, how their strength is maintained. We'll just go over a few lines so that there is an overlap for those of us who have not joined the last session. So these powers, these potencies of the spirit, which all of us partake of, we all of us have a taste of, they are implacable in their timeless purity. They're unbending in their purity. They refuse all the barter and bribe of worship. In our ignorant prayers, what we do is, God give me this, make my relationship better. And so we just ask for all the materialistic possible things, but we don't know what is really required for us. So they refuse. If I'm praying for my selfish agendas, they will refuse. They won't buy into my selfish agendas, although I may be praying very intensely. Unmoved by the cry of revolt and ignorant prayer, they reckon not our virtue and our sin. So no matter how many long list of virtues I may give them, that look how many virtues I have done. Now grant me my prayers. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. What matters is the purity of our heart. Only that they listen to. They bend not to the voices that implore. They hold no traffic with the error and its reign. They are guardians of the silence of the truth. They are keepers of the immutable decree, a decree which cannot be challenged. The divine will, which is unfolding in this manifestation with all its purity, it cannot be challenged. So these guardians, these potencies or powers of the spirit, which are immortal, they are the keepers of this divine will, that they would not let anything happen that the divine will has to bend. A deep surrender. And what gives them this strength? A deep surrender is their source of might. And I think we can also relate, as we were doing it last time, that with our own self, that the more we surrender our each and every action, thought, feeling more and more to the higher intelligence, that I don't know what is the best for me, but you guide me, you provide what is the path for me. The more we see that we become fearless, the more strength we are able to tap, the inner strength we are able to tap. Otherwise, in expecting and demanding from the whole world, we just keep on losing that strength and power. So a deep surrender to the divine will is their source of might. How are they so powerful? This is how they are so powerful, because they are just slave to the divine will, nothing else. No ego will move them. A still identity, their way to know. We were discussing last time that how Sri Aurobindo talks about knowledge by identity. So first is knowledge by sympathy, that, okay, let me step into your shoes. Although I am a different person, but let me step into your shoes. That's how I know you. But when we talk of knowledge by identity, then I am the consciousness which is there inside you. So that I can absolutely identify with where you are right now. That is knowledge by identity. A still identity, their way to know. This is how they know about things. Motionless is their action, like asleep. So how we do in human scenario, how we do our actions are very pompous. We make it pompous, we show it off. But their action is a very hidden action, motionless. Things will not even move and the action is taking place. The divine will is unfolding. At peace regarding the trouble beneath the stars. Now, although they see that in mortal existence on earth, there is trouble. We go through so much of intense struggle and strife and everything, but they are at peace. At peace regarding the trouble beneath the stars, deathless, watching the works of death and chance. Now, why are they at peace? Although they themselves are deathless, they allow the happenings of death and chance to happen. There must be some purpose to it. That's why they gently, kindly allow the drama to unfold. Immobile, seeing the millenniums pass, untouched, while the long map of fate unrolls. Now, if we look at the words of Mother Sri Aurobindo and other masters, we see that the only purpose of human existence is to grow in our consciousness, to become aware and conscious of our divine presence. But if we generally look the way we live the human mortal life, half of the lifetime we are not even aware of our purpose. So they see while the millenniums pass, so we are just involved in the drama of life. We've forgotten our purpose, but somehow that is the way it is unfolding. Long map of fate unrolls. Untouched. They are untouched. Why they are untouched? Because they know that the divine will happen. I will become conscious of my divine presence, no matter how many lifetimes I may have to take. But the other thing is that in eternity, there is no time limit. That's why they are at peace. Because if not in this lifetime, okay, I can do in another lifetime. But for us, mortal beings, for us, human birth is very precious. But in eternity, one can go on and on and on. So they are at peace. They allow the drama to unfold at their own pace. They look on our struggle with impartial eyes. Now they don't judge, the way we look at each other, we judge continuously. Even when we are not consciously judging, an unconscious judgment is going on. If we look at our thoughts and feelings, unconscious, we may not be aware of it. We may not even want to be judgmental, but the default pattern is that we are judgmental. That, okay, this is a sin and this is a virtue. That is a superior person, that is an inferior person. So we keep on calculating. The mind is very calculative. And since most of us live in the mind unknowingly, although we may say that we live in the heart, but the mind is active most of the times. So it calculates, it has own categories. It makes boxes, puts some people in this box and the others in the other box. So this is how we do the partial kind of judgment. But they don't have any judgment. For them, a terrorist is equivalent to a person who is living a sincere life. Why? Because there are many, many reasons why a terrorist may be a terrorist in this life. We have no idea in what way these forces work. So they look on our struggle with impartial eyes. And yet, without them, cosmos could not be. So although they are very detached and aloof, and yet they are the ones which is the base of the existence. Impervious to desire and doom and hope. Impervious is a kind of a rock, which is non-porous to, for example, water. So that no matter how much water goes on it, it becomes impervious. It does not take in the water like a sponge. So they are not touched by the desires that we live in, by doom, by our struggles and darkness and our hopes. Impervious to desire, doom and hope, their station of inviolable might, a strength that cannot be violated, moveless, upholds the world's enormous task. And since all the drama that is to happen, we need a solid base. If you go for a theater, so the play where it is happening, the play is happening on a stage. Now the stage is not moving. The stage is like a solid base. And even if we see that the stage is moving, the moving stage will be standing on something which is unmovable, unshakable, right? So they provide that unshakability so that the whole manifestation can go on. Moveless, upholds the world's enormous task. Its ignorance is by their knowledge lit. World's ignorance is lit up by the presence of these powers. Something like pure love, compassion, kindness, strength, courage. These are immutable powers. And they are the ones which ignite us. They make us kind of, they grow inspiration in us that yes, something more is possible than my present scenario. Its ignorance, the world's ignorance, is by their knowledge lit. Its yearning lasts by their indifference, owing to the fact that these powers are very indifferent. They don't give bias to one particular person or the other particular category. This indifference makes them a little aloof, like distant. And what happens is that owing to this aloofness, I am pulled towards these powers because they have so much of purity and strength in them that I am pulled. The world and the human existence is almost pulled. It yearns towards these powers. As the height draws the low ever to climb, when there is, a small hill in front of us, by natural, we will feel like climbing. So the presence of these powers make us climb forward. That yes, something higher than our present existence is possible. Something more pure is possible. Something more sincere is possible. As the height draws the low ever to climb, as the breadths draw the small to adventure vast, looking at a vast ocean, it calls you towards itself. Looking at a vast field, maybe a vast green patch of land. So somehow the call is so magnetic that it calls you without saying any word. It calls us towards that vastness. And I know that I am little, and something in me kind of is called towards that vastness. So just like that, their aloofness drives man to surpass himself. And Mother says in her commentaries on Life Divine, that it's only the human being that is capable of self-exceeding. A dog remains a dog, a horse remains a horse, a snake will remain a snake throughout its mortal existence. It's only human consciousness which can become divine consciousness. It can self-exceed itself. That is our possibility. So although I may be very, very ugly right now, I may have so many weaknesses, uncountable, but that is not my complete truth. That is where I am right now, but much, much more is possible for me. This is only possible as a human being at the moment. And that's why it's so precious. Our passion heaves to wed the eternal calm, our dwarf search mind to meet the omniscience light. What does a mind want? A mind always remains a restless character. Ego always is a restless character. And all they are wanting is rest. And when we talk of the divine, we call that divine is Param Shanti. So what are we seeking then? Through all my endeavors, I am actually seeking the annihilation of my own limitations, which is the ego and the limited mind. And when the mind merges back into the source, knows itself by being the source, that is what we loosely call as enlightenment. That now I'm in at least a bit in touch with myself. But the journey continues, the journey never ends. Because since the divine is infinite, this enlightenment journey is also infinite. One realization after another realization after another. So it's endless, just like space is endless, just like that, our realizations are also endless. So our dwarf search mind wants to meet the omniscience light, a light which is all-knowing by itself. Our helpless hearts to enshrine the omnipotence force. When we are feeling helpless, we feel so weak in the being, as if we have no strength left. Everything is become futile. And what are those hearts seeking? What are our helpless hearts seeking? They are seeking to be one with the divine strength. Unknowingly, we are seeking that. So here was where we stopped last. We will continue, we'll read the new lines, and please keep on sharing any thoughts that come in between. Keep on unmuting and sharing any thoughts or comments or questions. Yeah, anyone who feels ready.
Acquiescing in the wisdom that made hell and the harsh utility of death and tears, acquiescing in the gradual steps of time, careless they seem of the grief that stings the world's heart, careless of the pain that rends its body and life.
Yes, thank you. Acquiescing in the wisdom that made hell. So they like reluctantly, they allow the hell to be here. It's not that they would like the hell to be here. You know, what is hell? Hell is what we create in our minds for our own self. You know, and what we can create, the powers that we have, we can create such a great hell for ourselves by being in the mind, that it is just remarkable, the capacity that we have. We create our own hell by thinking and thinking and thinking and abusively thinking about a certain pattern or, you know, story I may have in the head. And so we can go really so far into that hell that we are also, some of us are also propelled to commit suicide, you know, that I want to just end this life because it's too much. And if we actually look at it, all that was that I created myself. But we rarely take that responsibility, that I am the one responsible either for the cleanliness of my mind or for the hell of my mind. And it's hard because there are so many forces at play, and also it's very hard to be totally honest with ourselves. You know, the ego plays such a drama that very rarely one can be completely, absolutely honest at all the times. And those people who are able to maintain that honesty and sincerity, which Mother says is the cornerstone of spiritual path, sincerity, you know, we have the results also. We immediately notice where we falter, shamelessly accept where we falter, what are the weaknesses which have to be worked upon. Why do I fall in the trap again and again? You know, so we catch our weaknesses, and it's a beautiful kind of grace working if we are able to catch our own weaknesses. Only then I can self exceed myself. So they allow, acquiescing is they allow reluctantly the wisdom that made hell. But this also has a purpose. So if depression is happening, if I'm making my own hell, it's not by mistake that it's happening. There is some or the other good that is going to come out of that. What is that good? Now, in our human ways, we cannot know, because we have such limited ways of understanding. You know, if somebody gets a big prize, we say, yes, yes, you're so lucky, you're so lucky. If somebody fails in an exam, we say, oh, you're so unlucky. So this is how we, in our limited way, look at things. You know, this reminds me, maybe you have heard this story. There was this a saint, like a sage, who lived in a village, and with his family. One day, a unicorn-like character came to his place, you know, maybe a white horse or a unicorn. And people said, oh my God, you're so lucky, you're so lucky. You must have done some good karma in the past that this precious, you know, animal came to you. And the sage says, because he is a wise sage, so he says that, okay, wait, it's okay, it's okay. It's nothing so exciting. And the other day, you know, after some time, his young boy, he's riding on that horse-like character, and he falls and he breaks his leg. So people begin to kind of conclude that, oh my God, this is, you know, really manhoos, you know, that it came to you. And so he again says that, okay, wait, you know. So, and the series of events take in such a manner that it just is up and down. So you cannot really say what is good, what is bad. You know, such is our human limited perception that we decide that, okay, if you're going through a divorce, oh my God, so bad, so bad. If you lost a child, oh my God, so bad. So our things of looking at the worldly manifestations, our perception, it is so limited and narrow that we don't know what good there can be in a trauma. We have no idea what good can it be in a tragedy, seeming tragedy. So these powers, since they're all wise powers, they have a larger picture. They allow the drama of the hell, since it holds a wisdom which unfolds later, and the harsh utility of death and tears. You know, all of us have been through intense phases in life where we are full of tears, full of emotional, you know, drenched in emotional drama. And we know that there is a wisdom hiding there. We know that why we needed to go through that. Some of us may not know it right now, but as the story unfolds, we begin to know, okay, why that phase was necessary for me. You know, maybe it allowed me more detachment in life. Maybe it made me more kinder. It made me aware of my own flaws and weaknesses. You know, it made me connect with people at a different level. So all these things we get to know only later as we become a little wiser, to look at things in a larger picture. But they see it. They see the utility of death also, that why death is necessary. So they say, masters say that once a soul has enough of experiences in this lifetime, and it says that now my task can be better done in the other lifetime in a different form. So it doesn't matter, it leaves the body just like we leave a cloth. We change the cloth. So in Gita also the same thing comes, that the soul, the imperishable soul, it goes on and on, leaving bodies like just we leave dirty clothes. But we make such a big ruckus out of when somebody dies. But these powers realize the importance of death, that it's not in vain that death is happening. There is a purpose behind all the death and the tears. Acquiescing in the gradual steps of time. So although they are stationed in timelessness, but they understand, they allow the process of time, gradual process of time to unfold. Very gradual, very slow. Eons pass, and then a little realization will come. But for them, doesn't matter. For them, what is an eon but a blink of an eye? Careless, they seem of the grief that stings the world's heart. Now, owing to this aloofness, it appears that they are very careless. They can't you see how much we are suffering? Like, a human cry goes on. How can you be so kathor, so cruel? Why we say that? Because we live in the desire soul. And a desire soul just wants and wants and wants and wants. And our journey as a human being is from moving from an identity with the desire soul to moving towards more and over or our true soul, which is the psychic being in Mother and Sri Aurobindo's words. So can I slowly, through my all experiences, realize that I am attached and that it brings me suffering? Desire is attached. Desires make us attached to things. My expectations make me attached to things and people and life situations. So can I see all the suffering that I have been through and use it in a manner that, yes, being desirous, living as the desire soul has given me so much of suffering. Now, can I utilize all those experiences and now move towards the deeper part of me, which is absolutely non-desirous, full of love, full of compassion, kindness, and selflessness for others? Can I work in identity with that soul consciousness? Is it a possibility? So that is our purpose. They seem to be careless. These powers, since they are aloof, they seem to be careless. Careless they seem of the grief that sting the world's heart, that how much atrocity people have done on this planet. The Nazis, the world wars, even in India, so at so many levels, so many atrocities have been done continuously. And then something cries out, but they seem to be careless. Careless of the pain that rends its body and life. So as if it doesn't matter to them, which a pain that tears apart the bodies, a pain that takes the life away from you. But they are untouched. Why? Why would they remain untouched? So let us, so please keep sharing if you have anything to share, else we'll just continue. Yeah, anyone who feels ready to read the lines in Yoga.
Above joy and sorrow is the grandiose walk. They have no portion in the good that dies. Mute, pure, they share not in the evil done, else might their strength be marred and could not save.
Yes. So where are they stationed? Above joy and sorrow. We live in dualities. We run from pain. And that's why we love our comforts, because we run from pain. We don't want to be uncomfortable. If somebody comes to our place, how do we treat people? We want them to be comfortable. Be comfortable. And this comfort is such a killing thing. Such a killing thing. It just kills the soul. Whenever we live in comfort zones. Whenever we do not exceed ourselves, it kills slowly the passion and the drive that comes from the soul. Not really an attachment wala passion, it's like a drive, a very kind of a mellow drive that comes from the soul, which has a knowing that, okay, this is the right path for me, this is the right path for me. But the more we get stable in our comfort zones, and thanks to the way it happens, that no matter I may have lived in my comfort zones for 2-3 years, something or the other, if I'm lucky, will happen, a seeming tragedy, a seeming accident, which will try to move me from my inertia. And that's why these things are like blessings. If I have not been moving already on the path designed for me, if I have gotten really too much settled somewhere, something or the other happens which makes me move. A fallen relationship, a broken relationship, a broken marriage, some or the other really intense thing will happen, which will make me, push me that, okay, go ahead now, enough of your drama. Go ahead, chart your way ahead. So they stand above the dualities. They stand above joy and sorrow. For them, neither pleasure is important, neither pain is important. For them, only one thing matters: growth of human consciousness. And that's why we can also say at times God is cruel. And paradoxically, we can say God is kind. They're extremely kind. In his cruelness, God is extremely kind. Why? Because if this cruelty could not have been done on me, then how would I know what is the purpose of my existence? So paradoxically, and wherever truth is, we say there is a paradox. Paradoxically, the cruelty done upon me is the kindest act from the highest intelligence. It makes me aware of something deeper in me, which takes me beyond my limitations. Above joy and sorrow is that grandiose walk. They have no portion in the good that dies. We as human beings, we often contemplate why good people always suffer and why good things have to pass, but they don't have any portion in that. Everything has its own importance. Passing of good also has its importance. What is the importance? Our limited minds do not understand. The larger drama, we do not understand how these are unfolding. So they have no portion in the good that dies. Mute, pure, they share not in the evil done. So they have nothing to do with the evil. They have nothing to do with the good. They are above joys and sorrows. And in that, the neutral kind of a zone, which is full of potentialities, they walk. Else might their strength be marred and could not save. Now, the example I was using here the last time also, that imagine that I am a parent and my child is in distress. The best service that I can be capable of would be when I am actually a bit detached from the child. If I am myself entrapped in too much of emotions and my mental conflict, I will not be able to serve the child the best. So to have my strength intact, to have my inner poise intact, I need this detachment. Then only I can do the best for the child. So since they are not involved in a human kind of involvement, in the good and the evil and the joys and the sorrows, that's why their strength is stable. Else their strength will be stained or marred. It will be spoiled. If they become too involved in the emotional, then they lose their strength. Immediately you become weak. I'm sure all of us must have noticed these movements in our life. When we are involved in something, we lose our strength. If I want to regain strength, I have to be a bit aloof from that situation, and only then I can act from a place of inner strength. Yeah. Keep sharing insights, some any reflections. Yeah, anyone who feels ready?
Alive to the truth that dwells in God's extremes, awake to a motion of all-seeing force, the slow outcome of the long ambiguous years and the unexpected good from woeful deeds. The immortal sees not as we vainly see. Thank you, madam.
Thank you. So these powers are alive to the truth that dwells in God's extremes. They understand the necessity of dualities. No, rather than running from pain and walking towards pleasure, if I begin to understand the necessity why pain came to my life, why suffering came to my life, what was the lesson it tried to teach me, I think then even suffering is welcome. I run away from failure only when I have not really gone to the depths of failure. Only then I will be shy of failure. I run away from suffering only when I have not gotten to the depths of pain and suffering. But if I have really gotten to the depths, even in one instance, I have gotten to the depths of my suffering and seen the naked face of suffering, which is the divine's face itself, the lesson that it has for me to progress ahead. I think then we will not be able to say that, oh God, give me only joy and no, do not make me suffer. We'll not be able to say that prayer. And even for others, we won't be able to say that keep that guy always away from pain, because you know what importance pain has in life. Although we can pray in a different manner that please grant more strength for all of us to go through all the pain and learn through all the challenges. So they are alive. We are not really alive. We are not present to the progress that is lying in failure and suffering, but they are alive to the truth that dwells in God's extremes. They understand the necessity of this alternation of pleasure and pain and pleasure and pain. They understand this. Awake to a motion of all-seeing force. They are conscious of the action of Chit Shakti, consciousness force. They're conscious of it. They know the unfolding of this force, a force which is not mechanical force, a force which knows what it is doing. Although its ways may be totally eluding for the human eye, but they are aware, these powers are aware that this force that may seem to rotate earth on and on and on for eons is not a dumb force. It is a conscious presence. Somewhere I was maybe reading or listening to a talk where it was shared that earth is a conscious being. Imagine if we contemplate on this idea of earth being a conscious being, will we be able to treat the earth the way we treat it right now? And if we look at our own bodies, our bodies are just a mirror or a reflection of the earth's beingness. So we have exactly the similar, almost near identical composition of whatever minerals and, the water composition of present on planet Earth. And if we look at our bodies, so it's like a macrocosm and the microcosm. So there must be some purpose to it. But we are so, I don't know where we are lost mostly, such as the human existence, owing to the fact that we are born in amnesia and forgetfulness, that it's rarely that we become of earth as a conscious being, a being that is alive and now has manifested in this form of earth. So they are awake. They are not unconscious to this presence. They are awake to a motion of all-seeing force, and hence they can also relax in faith. That we human beings cannot relax. That, oh my God, what will happen if this happens? Oh my God. But they know that all is designed. Everything is moving according to a plan. So even though something has happened which appears so ugly or which should not have happened, okay, there must be some reason. I may not know it now, So can I just relax in that faith? Let it unfold. The slow outcome of the long ambiguous years. No, ambiguous years, like they're not really making sense. Ambiguous, which is a bit mixed up, not really clear and crisp. But when we look at the outcome, then everything in retrospect kind of makes sense when we start to make, connect dots in our life. The slow outcome of long ambiguous years and the unexpected good from woeful deeds. We often find ourselves indulged in such drama that later we see that, oh my God, why was I stuck there? How could I do that? But if we truly closely look, we will know why that phase was necessary. And if we have not really gotten why that phase was necessary, it means we have not gotten to the depth of the issue yet. So just the need is to go a little closer. And there is always an unexpected good, even from the woeful deeds. Either those deeds may be coming from others. Oh, why did that person did that to me? Or that deed might be my own deed done to somebody else or myself. Everything has a purpose. The immortal sees not as we vainly see. We see just the superficial and that's it. We are in fear and we are in anxiety. So I think these are so inviting lines that can we be just aware of this truth that yes, something more is happening of which I may not be aware, my limited mind not be aware. And can I just have a little more faith that I can allow this drama to unfold at its own time, so that something in the being settles, some settling down happens. From desire soul, a step closer to the true consciousness. And then slowly in time, something more is revealed to us that about the previous phases in our life or the present happening in our life. Something more is revealed. So the immortal does not see as we see. Our way of seeing is very vain. It's like useless almost. We don't go to the depth of matter. We always look at the surface mostly, react from the surface. But it's not how the larger power sees. So it allows the drama to unfold, owing to the fact that it has the larger picture. Yeah, anyone feels ready?
He looks on hidden aspects and screened powers. He knows the law and natural lines of things, undriven by a brief life's will to act, unharassed by the spur of pity and fear. He makes no haste to untie the cosmic knot or the whole world's stone jarring heart to reconcile.
Yes, thank you. So the immortal, also referring to these powers, immortal powers, or also now referring to as one conscious divine being. He, the immortal, looks on hidden aspects and screened powers. I am ignorant of my own truth. That's how I live. I don't even know who I am. And the way I look at others is that as if I know everything about that person. Such is our arrogance, such is how we live. A little we get to know a person and then we begin to make judgments and all kind of stories in our head that, yes, I know. While the fact that we ourselves are unaware of our own truth. But the immortal looks on the hidden aspects and screen powers. And mother would say, when people would sit in front of the mother, mother would see more than the person who is sitting. She would directly see the psychic. What is your deepest aspiration, deepest longing? That is what mother would know about just by looking at one person or just maybe hearing the name. But we are not aware of those hidden aspirations. We are not aware of even our hidden potentialities. We always are full of our limitations. Oh, no, I am not worthy of it. Oh, no, I am so little. I am so little. So we neither do we allow others to go ahead, neither do we allow ourselves to go ahead. Such is the limited, mind that we are stuck in. But the immortal does not see like that. Immortal knows and thinks much, much better of us. It looks on the hidden aspects, the forces, hidden forces at play, which we may not be aware of, and the screened powers, powers which are screened at the moment, but will be unscreened later. He knows the law, the divine law, and natural line of things. So, billions of human beings on this planet, each one has its own folding of their Swadharma. The path that may work for me, the exact permutation combination may not work for you. For you, something else will work. And that is what we call the unfolding of dharma of life, the unfolding of your own truth, inner truth. So each person is so unique, so special. And the unfolding of life is also very, very special, very natural, organic unfolding. As if there is a law which is unfolding and manifesting itself. So the immortal is aware of this law, the divine law, and the natural line of things. What is the least possible, the path, resistance path that one has to take so that the life unfolds in a manner which is the requirement of the soul. Undriven by a brief life's will to act. The immortal is not driven by the little instincts and impulses. That, oh my God, I'm craving for this. Oh, let me have this. So we are very impulsive and instinctive in nature. And the moment an impulse comes, the idea is to satisfy that impulse. This is how we live mostly. Just like an animal lives. It has an instinct, it goes out and satisfies itself. That's it. That's an animal life. I want to, get some food. I go out, hunt, eat. That's it. I do not question my impulse. Now, this questioning is available only to human beings. Am I just an impulse? Or am I more than an impulse? So this questioning ability and detaching ability is not there with the animal, mostly. Maybe rare, very conscious animals may have this capacity, but we know that animals have their own limitations. They have their own innocence also. An animal is a pure thing, their psychic mostly is in front. They're very pure, very docile. Even in their ferociousness, they are very innocent. But we are not animals. We are something more than an animal, but yet trapped in our animalistic instincts. So the immortal is not driven by a brief life's will to act. It's not driven by impulses, unharassed by the spur of pity and fear. So how I move? I move by, oh my God, what is happening with these people? So I move by pity. I'm moved by pity. And that is how I act. As if I am placed at some higher pedestal and something bura is happening to somebody. So I'm moved by pity. I'm harassed by pity. And fear. Fear makes me move. Fear of kya hoga agar? What if this happens? But the immortal is unharassed by pity and fear. It has the larger plan in sight. It knows why the things are happening in the way they are happening. Every karma has to unfold itself. Now, if somebody says something insulting to me, now can I look at it like it's their karma which is unfolding, and can I not be participated in it? Usually what I do is I become immediately participative. Okay, how did you say that to me? मैंने तुम्हारा क्या बुरा किया है? So we immediately partake of cause and effect, become indulged in karma again. But when other person is saying something out of anger or out of whatever, frustration, is that a possibility at least at some moments of my time, life, that I do not react and let the other person go through what he has to go through? Mostly we are not there, but that is our possibility. being open, loving, and compassionate, and yet not indulging in the drama, emotional melodrama. He makes no haste to untie the cosmic knot or the world's torn, jarring heart to reconcile. So there is no haste to get enlightenment, for example. There is no haste to connect the dots of my life. Nothing is done in haste. Why? Because in eternity, there is enough time. So my restless, desired soul may be like, going nuts. Why this is not happening? Why this is not happening? Why this is not getting resolved? When will this get resolved? But there is no haste when it comes to the immortal, the divine. There is no haste to untie the cosmic knot, a knot which is at the cosmic level. All of us go through that knot. Ghat, which we want to open, which brings tension in the rope. And we want to open it too hastily, but no, that's not how the divine sees it. He makes no haste to untie the cosmic knot or the world's torn, jarring heart to reconcile. Jarring is the sound that a door makes when, for example, it's not oiled properly at the hinges. Jars, like it's like not a very beautiful sound. It's like annoying at times, irritating. You don't want to hear that voice. So as if our torn hearts, and why we are torn, I think this is also very important to understand. Why are we torn? We are torn because we are identified with the desire soul too much. We live in our attachments, although that is not our home. Our true home is that unshakable place within, which all of us have a taste of. But yet we are pulled towards the desire soul again and again. Something or the other becomes so important in life that I give in to another expectation. I give in to another demand from some person, from life situation. And hence the struggle again, resurfaces. And that's why it's jarring. It's trying to reconcile, but no reconciliation is happening. Something is not right, but I don't know what exactly is not right. So kind of, I think we need to also become at the same time, just pointing out reminders for my own self also that, can I become more aware of this, that I don't need to depend for my happiness on worldly things. Although I have to remain in world, but the best service that I can give to the world or to myself is to unite with my true consciousness. Let go of the desires and the expectations and the demands and ambition and the greed. The moment I become aware of it, I don't partake of it. Why? Because I've done it enough. Doing it enough is also necessary, I believe, because then we are convinced that aise nahi hoga. By being desirous, I cannot be happy. But by being desireless, maybe something different happens. Then I can even mingle up with people, but without any expectations and demands. I can give my best offering to the world, but without expectations and demands. And that gives you an inner freedom. That gives us, all of us, an inner freedom. That you are not basing your happiness on how the other person or the world reacts to what you have said or given or offered. Yeah. So I think we can, maybe take up this paragraph and then we'll see if you want to take more. We can take,
In time, he waits for the eternal's hour. Yet a spiritual secret aid is there. While a tardy evolution's coils wind on, and nature hews her way through the adamant, a divine intervention thrones above.
Yes, thank you. In time, he waits for the eternal's hour, the full blooming to happen, the blossoming of the being to happen. So the immortal waits. It's like a very patient parent you have, very patient, extremely compassionate parent we have. He allows us to go through all the failures because he knows that how important it is for me to go through all those failures. So he does not interfere much. He does not ungli karo too much. So that would, and only later, when such people are there in our lives, such compassionate people are there in our lives who do not interfere much in our life. They may guide, suggest, but they don't interfere. I think only later, if we become a little wiser, we realize that what was the power of that person in our life. Very calm, patient, perseverant, and also compassionate and highly available fellow, referring to the divine, the immortal, who in time, again, see the paradox, in time, he waits for the eternal's hour. So he is put next to each other, he's put time and the eternity next to each other. In time, he's waiting for the eternal's hour, the true blossoming of the individual to happen, when the earth itself will become completely divine, full of divine light, not that the divine light is obscured like it is right now. Yet, in time, he waits for the eternal hour, yet a spiritual secret aid is there. So although these things are happening, a spiritual secret aid, it's like like somebody is giving you from the backhand, not really letting anyone know that you are being given something. A spiritual secret aid is there, while a tardy evolution's coils wind on. It's a very long, toiling process of evolution, growth of consciousness, very long, if we look at it. Eons and eons, and we are moving on and on and on. A tardy evolution's coils wind on, and nature hews her way through adamant. Hewing is, when you're making way, for example, you go into a forest and a way is not there. So what you do, maybe you have a katari or something like a chaku, and with which, or maybe a danda with which you make your way. You are hewing your way, cutting through the stones, making your way. So the nature, how it kind of works in its own slow way. Now imagine, first we became a stone, then from that a plant, from that maybe an insect, unicellular organism, multicellular organism, dinosaurs, Neanderthal man. So such a long and tardy process of growth of consciousness and appearance of mind, growth of mind, and now going beyond the mind. So the nature, how it works is as if it's working really, really hard and trying to make her way through adamant. And when I was looking at it, adamant is something which is a very hard substance like diamond. If you have to cut through diamond, make it beautiful, you have to really work hard. Like you have to use an instrument which is very strong so that the diamond can be cut. So such thickness, such stubbornness of the inconscience, the darkness of the matter, nature has to hew her way through all this darkness and inconscience so that the consciousness evolves and becomes divine completely. So it's a long, tardy process of evolution. And yet, we are not alone. It's not that we are lost on a planet with no one here. Yet a spiritual secret aid is here. A divine intervention thrones above. So we are not unsupervised children playing this game. There is a divine intervention present right here. Let us take up this last few lines and then we can stop. Yeah. Anyone who wants to read?
Alive in a dead, rotating universe, we will not here upon a casual globe, abandoned to a task beyond our force. Even though the tangled anarchy called fate, and through the bitterness of death and fall, an outstretched hand is felt upon our lives. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mohanji. So something is alive in this dead, rotating universe. A divine intervention, thrones above, alive in a dead, rotating universe. So if we look at the bigger picture, you see all the planets rotating around sun again and again, again and again, again and again. So on the appearance, it may also appear like just a mechanical happening. The Big Bang happened and just mechanically all the planets went moving, and they are just moving and moving and moving. And we don't know when it will come to an end or when they'll stop moving or whatever. So something is alive in this dead, rotating universe, which appears to be dead. We whirl not here upon a casual globe. Now, those of us who may have gone through some words, referring to the specialness of Earth as a place for human evolution, the growth of consciousness. So Earth is a special place. There are also many other worlds and many other beings on other planets also, it is said. But we are not here casually and just like that. Just by an accident, we are here and let us enjoy our life and go. It's not just because of a superficial purpose that we are here. We whirl not here upon a casual globe, abandoned to a task beyond our force. So we are not really abandoned, given a task of growth of consciousness beyond our force. We don't even have the strength. And you say that I have to unite with my divine consciousness. How is that possible? I don't have the strength. So it's not like that. We are not lost and abandoned. And I'm sure all of us have experienced, glimpses of grace working in our life. Some or the other little way, we know that grace is with us, working with us, making our way ahead forward. Even through the tangled anarchy called fate, and through the bitterness of death and fall, an outstretched hand is felt upon our lives. Beautiful line. Imagine, this outstretched hand, as if someone is blessing whole of the earth. We don't know who that being is, but as if the being is blessing, this divine being, conscious being is blessing the earth. His hand is there on our lives. We are not alone and lost in this space and universe. Even through the tangled anarchy called fate, when we look at fate, the events that were bound to happen in our lives, it may seem that अच्छा जिसका जो मन हुआ कर लिया, like अच्छा मेरे में जो लिखा हुआ था बस वो हो गया, as if कि मेरा तो कुछ है ही नहीं. I'm just like a puppet of fate. Anarchy is, when the ruler is just, there is no ruler really, that जिसका भी जो मन आता है कर लेता है. Tangled up, that we don't know, we are not able to make sense of what is happening for what reason. It's all tangled up. You're trying to connect the dots, but they are not connecting. Even through the tangled anarchy called fate, and through the bitterness of death and fall, fall when we do something which we realize, oh my God, and I should maybe not have done that. Our own failures and mistakes. And we have a very judgmental way of looking at our own failures and mistakes. We are looking at it socially. कि लोग क्या कहेंगे, लोग क्या सोचेंगे. So whatever we kind of take in from the society, that becomes a failure for me. Okay, 98% is a winner. So if I have 30%, I am a failure. Why? Because the society says so. So these are our failures. These are our mistakes. But these are not for vain. And through the bitterness, although no matter how bitter I may feel when these kind of things, unwanted, unexpected events may happen, no matter how bitter I may feel, yet an outstretched hand is felt upon our lives. And I think at this moment, just before closing, I think maybe it's time that we recollect, if we have not done it already enough times, that we are taken care of. Even in our fall, we have risen. In Savitri only, there is this line that through all the falls, they are just means for a greater rise. So every fall, every so-called failure makes me somehow a better being. Somehow it is twisted in a way that it softens me, mellows me down, crushes a bit of ego, which I did not even know exist. Such is the game of the ego, that the more I think I become egoless, the more ego I may have. And it's very ironical also and mystical, mystical actually, that how mysterious, yeah, that that we may not even be aware that the ego is in function, and yet the ego plays itself out. So then some failure or a tragedy happens, and something gets crushed, and that crushing is auspicious, because that is what takes us closer to our essence, as if a wall breaks down. And that's how we know that, yes, grace is with me. Even through that shattering and breaking and crushing, that's the very proof that grace is with me. Because why would anyone care to crush me? Now that I have been crushed and made softer, now I know that something is with me. Some higher power is with me, guiding me. Yeah, any reflections? Anyone?
One has to go through the crushing and the pain to be able to realize that the outstretched hand is there.
Yeah.
Unless you step back and watch what is happening around you, it's very difficult to fathom for a normal human mental working to fathom that that is grace. Unless you are aware of it, you got to want to be aware.
Yeah, true.
These lines are very beautiful.
Very beautiful. Yes. You know, there is, I'm reminded of this couplet from Kabir. He says, Sura Sura bahut mile, घायल मिले ना कोई, घायल so घायल मिले तो राम भक्ति दृढ़ होए. You know, so when we are crushed, our ego is crushed, you know, and then we realize the grace presence of grace in our lives, the divine hand in our life. You know, then we have true friendships. You know, that yes, I have also been through that crushing. Oh, you have also been through crushing. You know, so घायल mile, Ram Bhakti drid hoy. So I really like this couplet. Yeah. Anyone else? Anything more?
Thank you, madam.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay then, everyone. Thank you for joining. Bye.